And so we're a little bit familiar with the Philippines from the Hutchisons. And so I don't know why I've never bought this story. They've had it for sale for years, and I just got it last year, and it's really good. So I hope you all enjoy it as much as I did when I went through it.
Is that continued or?
Yeah. And we will decide. It's either going to be 5 or 10 weeks, maybe 10, but we'll see tonight. If my husband thinks that I should keep going, that will be up to him. If he thinks it's going to, I told him it was up to him. I showed it to him. I said, should I do half or not? He said, I don't know, it's up to you. So I don't want to take up all of his time, though. So anyway, you can make that decision, okay? Domingue wiped the perspiration from his brown face with the back of his hand. The box of popsicles hanging over his shoulder was heavy, and even though it was only 7 o'clock in the morning, the hot sun of the Philippines was almost unbearable. Domingue carried a little bell which he rang to let people know the popsicle boy was coming their way. Can you imagine it? 7 o'clock in the morning here, the bell for popsicles? I guess maybe they had breakfast at 4 or something. I don't know. But anyways, if it was around Mom and Dad, they'd be ready for a popsicle by 7. He rang it louder and more often when he thought about his mother. His father was dead, and the money Domingue earned was urgently needed by his mother, whom he loved so well. Domingue wished his mother would not make him go to school. If only I had more time, he thought. I know I could find ways to earn more money, but Mother wants me to be educated so I can be somebody important when I grow up. Maybe a doctor, a lawyer, or maybe even a politician. But I think Grandfather's right, thought Domingue. I'm 11 now, and I do not need to go to school anymore, not if I'm going to work in the rice fields. Grandfather insists that all I need is a good strong back and nice strong feet. What do you think, Joshua? Work in the rice fields or go to school?
I'm not.
Domingue smiled as he thought of the way Grandfather always pushed his bare feet out in front of him whenever he talked of the many years he had worked on the rice terraces of Mindanao. His great toe stood away from the other toes. This, Grandfather said, is from gripping my toe into the soil as I worked, so I would not slide down the mountain. I was not as old as you are, Domingue, when my father put me to work on the rice terraces. Domingue loved his grandfather, but though he loved his grandfather, he was afraid of him. Grandfather had been born on the faraway island of Mindanao. So I'll show you a picture of the Philippines. Mindanao is way down here at the very bottom. And up here at the top is Luzon. And that's all they have. So if that's helpful to any of you map people. He was a Muslim and hated Christians. Now this was his grandfather. Grandfather liked to tell of his grandfather, so it would be Domingue's great-grandfather, who had killed many Christians with the sharp knives grandfather still treasured. He had been taught that to kill a Christian was to find favor with Allah, whom he worshipped as God. Let there never be a Christian in this family, Grandfather often said as he put his hand on the knife hanging from his waist. It was getting close to the time Domingue would have to leave for school. He was discouraged because he had sold only a few popsicles that morning. And then, over the ringing of his little bell and piercing through his thoughts, Domingue heard pounding. He stopped and listened a moment, then hurried faster down the dusty road and around a corner. Sure enough, the pounding noise was coming from a group of men who were building a house. They will buy, thought Domingue, for they earn lots of pesos. And buy the men did. They bought all of the popsicles Domingue had left in his little blue box. They had been at work for some time. Later, during the hottest part of the day, they would rest, but right now, this little pause was most welcome. As Domingue thanked the men and turned to leave, one of them called after him, "Be sure to take all that money home to your mother, boy." Domingue smiled, showed beautiful white teeth in his brown face. He knew why the men had warned him, for coming down the road toward him, Domingue saw two of his friends. He knew they would try to get him to give them a centavo, which is a penny, at least. Quickly, he lifted his loosely hanging shirt and tucked the money safely in the pocket of his short trousers. This money was going to his mother and to no one else. How proud she would be, for he had earned nearly a peso that morning. Domingue went quickly down the road. Then out from the home of the barrio missionaries, a stranger hurried, camera in hand. "May I take your picture, please?" she asked. Domingue smiled, raised his eyebrows, which means yes, and stood still. But before the stranger snapped the picture, Domingue's friends caught up to him. If a picture was to be taken, they were going to be in it too. They stood one on each side of Domingue as the stranger looked in her camera to get it set right. Across the street, an old woman squatted outside her home. She was washing clothes in a little basin and smoking a cigarette, the lighted end in her mouth.
That's real smart.
When she saw the three standing together, she raced to them, screaming and waving her arms. "No, no! If you take a picture with the three of you in it, something terrible will happen to one of you. Do not stand there. Run away. One of you, run." The old woman spoke in Tagalog, the language of the Philippines, a language the stranger did not understand. Before she knew what the old woman was screaming about, click went the camera, and the picture was taken. The boys ran down the road, laughing at the old woman's muttering, but Domingue stayed behind for a moment. "Don't worry," he said kindly. "No harm will come to any of us." The old woman hobbled sadly back to her wash, muttering and wagging her head. When Domingue reached his house, built off the ground on stilts, he climbed quickly up the ladder steps and went inside. He set his popsicle box in a corner, gave the money to his mother, and changed to his school clothes. He picked up the books he needed, scurried down the ladder, and dashed off to school. Some boys shouted after Domingue, calling him names, but Domingue did not mind. He knew they would gladly change places with him if they could. Instead, they had to work in the fields with the carabo, which are water buffalo, all day long. Domingue decided he was glad to be able to go to school. He really loved to study. But if only I could earn more money for Mother, he thought.
That's it?